So let's get started. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In this panel, we are discussing not the old school logistics theme, it's supply chain in the age of AI. So before we set up the stage for discussion, let me introduce the panelists, our speakers, starting from myself. My name is Raheel Bodla, and I work as a program manager in Bart Manufacturing. Bart Manufacturing is a manufacturing automation startup firm. Primarily, we are Tesla suppliers. We manufacture capital equipment for Tesla assembly lines. In my previous experience, I worked at Tesla as a global supply manager for Model X line. I've been working for Rockwell Automation and did some consultancy, some training for the industry professionals. I worked in Pakistan Air Force as a squadron leader. My master's I completed from MIT, Master's in Supply Chain Management program. My undergrad is in aerospace engineering. And I've been part of the open team since last 1 year. In our speakers, we have here Bindia Vakif. And Bindia is the founder and CEO of Regolin. She's also an advisory board member at MIT CTL, Center for Transportation and Logistics. Besides founding the company Regolin, she also started a nonprofit which is known as Global Supply Chain Resiliency Council. So she has done a lot. She is recognized as a leader, especially in the supply chain risk management area. She is a senior alum from the same program, MIT Masters in Supply Chain Management, and she has an MBA in finance as well. She has a lot of patents for supply chain risk management. Thank you, Bindia, for joining us today. We have next one, Waheed Umerani. He has great experience in supply chain. He is a supply chain leader and manufacturing expert at Argo AI. And in his previous experience, he worked at the amazing supply chain companies, which includes Apple, Amazon, Google. He has been working on some of the cool products like smart thermostat, like iPhone and the Echo products. So he brings great experience to our panel. He completed his master's from Stanford program of MS&E, Management Science and Engineering. Thank you, Waheed, for joining us today. And then we have in our panel speaker, Babar Yasin. He's the founder and CEO of Sourcing Ease, and he has more than 25 years of experience in supply chain in Silicon Valley. Especially, he has been working a lot in ERP solutions for designing supply chains in Silicon Valley for tech industry, also for textile industry. He brings a great experience to this panel, talking of both the perspective of Silicon Valley and also of the emerging economies that he's been working on. Especially his firm specializes in implementing blockchain, artificial intelligence, smart contracts with the suppliers for completing the purchasing. And Babar has also been very actively involved with Open Silicon Valley since the founding of the chapter. Thank you, Babar. Thanks for joining us here. We want to make this session very interactive and interesting for all the people. So, as we are talking of supply chain, we want to start with what is supply chain? And we want to involve all that. Yes, please, Amra, you go ahead. Exactly, we want to involve everybody. So, what's the understanding, what people understand as supply chain? Because we want to see this room full of all the people, and supply chain is an amazing, passionate field. We want to understand, what do people understand about supply chain? And yes, go ahead, please. Exactly, that's what we want to start from.
So it's bringing all the materials together to create something.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Exactly, that's what it is.
So I view it from the e-commerce or from the retailer perspective is all the vendors, which means supply chain to get the products and
Amazing. Right. Anybody wants to add what is supply chain as we understand? Yes. Absolutely, getting the right things at the right place at the right time when they're needed is supply chain. Wonderful. Let's ask our speakers. Yes, please. And at the right cost as well. Yeah, thank you. So what do you say, Bindia? What is supply chain?
It's actually all of, I think we are all right. It's making sure we buy from the right people, what we buy from them, how we get products to our customers at the end of the day, satisfying customers, making sure that if you're waiting for a medicine or it's there for you. If you're waiting for a product, you walk into the store, it's there for you. The quantity, the color, the price that you were looking for. And supply chain is the way to make it happen.
What? You want to add to it?
Yeah, I think it is also important that, when you do that, are you engaging with the right kind of partners to be creating a competitive edge, right? And so whether it be a supplier, whether it be a process, right? So those are the kinds of things that will make your products stand out and compete better with respect to everybody else, right? There are examples from the tech industry, right? When you hear that, company A has secured a large supply, full supplier A or X, right? And it happens purely from competitive perspective, which actually ends up, giving an edge to that company when they offer the product to customers.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It's ecosystem you build to make products. Right price, right time, so that you put it together. Like one time, Tesla was missing one tiny part, and they had to stop their production for a day or two.
Absolutely.
So it's just, it's all about supply chain. If you really want to bring your product in place.
Exactly. As we all understand now that what is supply chain, we understand if there is any simple product, we might have to source or buy something for it, where we buy from, what do we buy, how we buy. There would be something we would be making for that. What do we make, how do we make it, what are the processes, and then we distribute or we supply it to the consumer. So how we get that? So this is what supply chain is. So we're to start with so that all of us we are on the same page. And we're talking about AI meets supply chain, or the technologies in this technology age. It's not exactly the same the way it was before. So in order to get there, we want to understand that what is AI, what is big data. So if in the same way we could share what is AI and big data. Go ahead. Artificial intelligence. So what artificial intelligence means?
So when a computer actually learns from what it's done to do it better in future.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
It's a learning basically.
Exactly. And what would be big data? Yes, sir.
You can predict what is coming. So if let's say last time you have 100 parts but you reached only 98 for some reason, you want to ship 102 this time so that you have still some spare left.
Wonderful.
But one thing, in all this stuff, you're not talking about how the shipment, sometimes the shipment is very important for the product because it gets exposed to a high temperature cycles or some kind of other kind of shocks or something, that becomes useless for the end manufacturer.
Absolutely.
So that is area where probably artificial intelligence impacts the sensors and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Containers.
Exactly. Right. Let's hear from our speakers. regarding the big data, AI, all these new technologies which are getting embedded towards supply chain, what would you say, Bindia?
Yeah, so I mean, before I start talking about big data, what I want to level set on is just supply chain in this century, right? So if you think about it, 25 years ago, if you were a company, you had a factory, you bought stuff for building your products, your suppliers had their factories, maybe 1 or 2 states away from you. Well, that is no longer the case today. In the last 20 years, we are worldwide. You know, if you look at this phone has 5,000 parts, and 35 countries touch those parts before each part was assembled into this phone. So think about the complexity. Each part could have touched 2 to 3 countries before it made its way to the factory that put the phone together. And how would you like to get your phone with this button missing? Or with the box? Could Apple ship this phone if the box didn't make it? That was what Babar was talking about, which is that every part needs to be present in the right quantities. And if even one part isn't there, then you can't ship that product. If you can't ship that product, then you can't make your revenue. You can't, meet your number, which means your stock's going to take a hit. Customers are going to buy somebody else's product. And if you look just in the last 2-3 months, some real examples of this massive problem. If you caught the news, did you guys see F-150 news from Ford? Supplier factory fire yesterday. Top headline on CNN. Last year we had Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Maria, which right now, if you go to the hospital, IVs are in short supply. Why? Because the bags that hold IV and bloods are in short supply because suppliers were in Puerto Rico, one site that ships all the bags to all the hospitals. So American Red Cross has blood, they can't collect it and ship it. IVs that people can't buy. So this is a huge problem. Supply chain touches our lives every single day. So now in the context of that complexity, which is, think about what I just said. One part touches 2-3 countries. We have 5,000 of those that go into one product that have to make its way into the factory before the product can be shipped. This complexity cannot be managed by the human brain, right? Because the human brain is a silo. My brain is not connected to his brain, and it's not connected to his brain. So if we try to keep hiring more people to manage supply chain, we've just added 10 more silos for 10 more people in the company. So big data is basically taking all of this data that is out there on the internet, around the world in different formats, in people's heads or laptops, in documents, and it's putting all of this in one place so that we can extract meaningful intelligence and insights out of that. And AI then creates meaningful pathways or correlations and looks for patterns in that data so that we can make predictions. So how does that affect, or how is that applicable to supply chain, for example? So what Regolin does in this space is, for one simple example of big data making predictions, is in the Regolin system, we scan news. So news, think about it. I've just said one product buys parts that come from 35 countries. These 35 countries, they report things that are happening in different languages. So what we do is we're scanning 44 languages, and we're picking up news about, let's say, one event like factory fire. And every day we pick up how many factory fires happened in which country, and we let our customers know that, hey, this factory fire happened in Vietnam, it got reported in Vietnamese, and this factory builds these 15 parts that you're buying, and if you don't get these 15 parts, these could affect $50 million in your revenue. Now it's a prediction that was made, you have this information within hours of the factory fire happening, and the disruption hasn't actually hit you yet, so now you have weeks to go talk to the supplier, find out how bad the fire was, find another supplier or site or buy inventory, and make sure that your products aren't destroyed. this is where supply chain, big data, and AI, in probably the simplest way.
Wonderful, Bindia. That's wonderful to connect the dots. That's what we're here for, to understand. And as you said, that in terms of big data, how that helps in developing that, like a supply chain map, that you can see actually those 35 countries, those 1,000 suppliers, they come in the supply chain, and where it could be the weak link. So that's what Regolin, the company which was founded, and it has grown, that Bindia is the founder and CEO, that's what Regolin does. So once we speak, I would appreciate if we can keep talking about our company profiles as well so that people can understand more. Wonderful. Waheed, do you have something to add, please?
One quick thing. So on that fire, before the fire, can you protect and have them put some spares so that you have more time to take action rather than...
I love how you think, number one, because that is absolutely critical. And a lot of times people forget that they need to be proactive because, look, a factory fire can happen anywhere. So a lot of times people aren't working closely with their suppliers and understanding, does the supplier have a robust business protection and recovery plan in case of any event, not just a factory fire, but they could have a factory fire, they could have a chemical spill, they could have an earthquake or a hurricane, I mean, depending on what region. Do they have a robust business continuity plan? Is there an alternate site available? All of those things have to be figured out beforehand. But love the way...
That's a great question. Yes.
Yeah, because that didn't happen in silicon. The silicon wafers are made in Umerani, there's a problem there.
Yes.
Thailand is big. Water floods, plastic assembly was gone. And there's all kind of issues happen. I see in my life, which
Sure.
provided a lot of problem or shocks to the company.
We should talk on.
Yeah. So Waheed, please.
Well, so you can see that she's dealing with risk management, and you can see the excitement that she just displayed, right? Just to add a couple of points to what Bindia was mentioning, right? So going back to the comment you had, right? One of the bigger tasks for supply chain is really to really look at the weakest link in the supply chain, right? And also, a lot of actually there are head-scratching moments where you go like, okay, I don't see it, but what could produce that weakest link, right? Right. The example that you were talking about, it's related to the Japan earthquake, right? And we, I think all of us have lived through it, right? And it was.
You were in Japan at that time, right?
Sorry, I was. Yeah, no, I was actually. We had this device to support, and essentially woke up one morning and it's like single source, right? So it didn't matter which supplier you were dealing with. Everybody who was doing that kind of a device had an embedded supply chain that was going to the same source, right? So a lot of times, you have to actually pull your head out and you go like, okay, I don't see the risk, but what is the weakest link, right? That could take the whole thing down, right? A lot of times it is the stuff that you mentioned, logistics, right? We talk about supplier capacity, there is enough of it when we want to actually make the product, right? It happens that some basic stuff like moving the product from factory to the airport, that becomes the weakest link, right? So that's one point that I wanted to add. The other one is actually how the AI is playing in the supply chain is purely coming from the perspective that companies spend a lot of money in either overstocking or understocking. You go to buy a shirt and you're all excited, you go like, that's the color, that's the style I want. And you go like, shoot, it's not the size that I want.
Yeah.
You have only 15 minutes, what are you going to do, right? You're going to go for plan B. All of a sudden, the supplier that actually had the right style, it was understocked, right? And it's a very delicate balance. Together, understocking and overstocking is about $1 trillion. 1 trillion. Just imagine if you can actually reallocate that capital to make the channels more better, right? Get more protection out of your customer base. So those are the things that are working out.
And now, today, because of the technology, we can make it happen. Before, 20 years ago, this was not possible. So it was, supply chain is there for ages, like from the beginning. But today, because of the tools we have, be it hardware, software, or whatever technology, we can predict those challenges, what can happen, and how to avoid those challenges.
Great. So I would summarize the discussion with the audience and also with our speakers. So we understand that supply chain was there since the start of the human, right? So we were exchanging things, making products, and there was a supply chain that existed. Why these all technologies, AI, big data, are more relevant now, based on the supply chain problems that some of our speakers highlighted, our audience added to that. Like Bindia talked about, the blood has to get to the patient, but it could not. So those supply chain problems can be mitigated, and all those challenges can be overcome using these technologies, AI, big data. As Waheed talked about, we needed a product, it was not there. So that opportunity is lost. As Babar added to that, in the same way, if we are leveraging these supply chains towards the developing countries, these technologies would also be very helpful in that regard. Summarizing the AI, as my friend added here, AI is artificial intelligence, how we teach the computers to think like humans and solve their problems, that is AI. And that's how the big data, big data is large data that is used to analyze, to solve these problems, predicting human behaviors. So that's how it goes. Wonderful. So we have very less time left, but based on the other panels, we would like to put some good takeaways for our audience. So in terms of that, so could we talk about whether it's the supply chain driving these innovations, or is it the innovation driving the supply chain, or what would be the key lesson learned or a takeaway that you would share with the audience? Yes, please.
I mean, it's technology is in waves, right? I mean, we had 25 years ago, we were talking about EDI, right? And so each technology wave goes through its hype cycle. We get some initial proof, it demonstrates its value, and then it gets broadly adopted. So the question is it's a very interesting question, and the way I would say it is, for every technology, there's a cycle of adoption, prove it out, showcase the value, get the broader adoption. So right now, some of the technology waves are around, I would say 3-4 years ago, big data, definitely getting proven out now and delivering the promise, and now it needs to go for broader adoption. AI is kind of in that stage where we've done a lot of initial proof of concepts, proven it out, and now we need to kind of take it to the next level. And I would say blockchain, I know Robert, you work on blockchain, that's kind of emerging as that next wave. I mean, we see a lot of other technologies. 3D printing has massively transformational supply chain implications. I mean, spare parts supply chain. You know, today if you build a car, you have to basically support the spare parts supply chain for 25 years later, because people are going to be buying spare parts 25 years later for that model. 50 years later, I think, for some hardcore collector models, right? But I mean, 3D printing, you don't need that. So what does that mean for supply chain, right? Could you repair on site printing spares? I think it's massive. So there's very exciting, so I think supply chain is entering the world of transformation. And yeah, we have today these technologies and these challenges, but I feel like we've not even scratched the surface, and I'm super excited to see how technology shapes supply chain, shapes technology. So,
wonderful. You would share some concluding remarks?
I really wanted to turn the tables on this one now, right? And I wanted to ask you a question. So you have done your MIT program in 3D printing, right?
Yes.
Maybe, for the sake of audience, take a couple minutes and let us know, what is your take on 3D printing, and how is it supposed to enhance things, right, efficiencies in supply chain?
Thank you, Vakif.
Actually scanning too, because that goes hand in hand.
Wow. Yes. So my master's research thesis was on how 3D printing is going to shape the supply chains and which commodities are well suited for that. So we did a lot of research for 10 months. The conclusion was that the products which are highly customized, they are ideally suited at this point in time for 3D printing. But when it comes to mass scale, mass production, it's not there yet. Exactly what Bindia mentioned, that every technology has to go through that technology curve. It's not there yet. But if somebody needs to have a tooth implant, then yes, 3D printing. If somebody needs a hearing aid, if somebody needs healthcare, automotive, aerospace, these are the industries picking up more on 3D printing applications.
If I might add to that, we had a speaker at our conference in March from NASA, and he talked about 3D printing as in space, because obviously, there's no supply chain in space. Like you have what you got, and then you have to make stuff and fix your problems using whatever you have. So he talked about how 3D printing has tremendous implications for the space program, and so they're I think probably the most advanced in terms of where they have invested.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Babar, would you add some concluding remarks based on your experience? Especially what we want to hear is your experience of supply chain and also from emerging economies.
Well, in emerging economies, the challenge is they don't understand that concept. They still live in that old world. When you tell them that how to take advantage of the supply chain, first they don't get it. But once they get it, they want it now, because now they realize that this can help them. And that's what I really do right now, that integrate all these latest technologies in that whole process. So like blockchain and the smart contracts and everything. So they are really excited about that, and I'm working to put it together for them.
Wonderful. There was a question. Did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I want to add to this. In order to enhance the supply chain without increasing the cost, because that's very important. That's why they have always just in time delivery and stuff like that. Stuff like that.
Absolutely. As we were discussing, so would like to summarize what our speaker said. So in terms of as we would say, first we have to understand, appreciate what the supply chain is, what are the problems we talked about. These technologies can absolutely provide all the solutions to those challenges, and we have to use that to leverage and to educate the other people as well, so that they can understand and they can appreciate that, yes, these technologies are there. So as Bindia talked of some of the numbers, like $600 million, a supply chain disruption causing a $600 million, that's a great piece of information for people at our level to talk with our leaders that they need to approve a 600K solution so that they can award a 600 million problem. So
I think the other thing is the dollars are being spent. I think the big challenge is people are running supply chains with people, So we are spending money, or we are running supply chains with inventory. So if you look at a typical pharma life science company, they're holding 1 year's worth of inventory, which means their inventory turns are 1 or less. By comparison, in the high-tech industry, we see inventory turns of 10 or more. 10 was when I was in supply chain,
It's
10 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
15 or more.
Yeah, so inventory turns of 1 means you have so much room to cut costs there. And technology can help you be agile, fast, and responsive, which means you don't need as much inventory. So that's where technology can really help. I just will say one thing. If you're in supply chain, a lot of times we see a lot of barriers to adoption of technology because people are inherently concerned about, well, will this replace my job, and will this take my, will this now automate something I do, and the cost-benefit analysis and the ROI is sometimes a little bit hidden. What I would say is it's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So go for it. If you feel that this technology has promise, go do something with it, carve out a proof of concept, and see if it delivered on the promise or if you see potential. And then, go ask for forgiveness, but ask for permission to roll it out to a broader scale. But don't stop and ask for everybody in the company to tell you go forward, because that will never happen, or it will happen 5 years later. By then, your competitors have already done something, and now you're behind.
You have a question, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the big 800-pound gorilla is Amazon, right?
Yes.
So you can get on your phone, you can get on your computer, and you can order something and have it delivered tomorrow, right? So that's an example of a supply chain that's very well-oiled, right? And so let's just say that Amazon sold out some, they need to buy more from their supplier, and so forth down the chain. So you can imagine that if they run out of phones, the phone supplier has to buy all their parts, which the part suppliers have to buy their raw materials and stuff like that. Is any of this going towards like a predictive AI model where the material supplier for the parts for the phone, Amazon, has privy information to Amazon selling something to you, or Amazon's forecast?
So let me actually take that one, right? So if you look at the extent of what it takes time-wise, right, to make a very common product that we are all used to, right? If you look at this kind of a device from start to finish, right, it could be 5-6 months, right? The question is, how do you actually, so if you say, okay, I want to have a product, right, out there, millions of units, right, you need to actually see it at least 6 months, right, because it takes 6 months to actually get to that point, right, whether it be the display part of it, whether it be some of the semiconductor part of it, right, and that's just the nature of the lead times. So what are companies doing, right? Companies are looking at more and more seasonality component to it, right? That means I'm going to sell more, say, in December compared to January, right? There are companies, there are products that are more sort of geared toward these special events, like, there are suppliers or there are companies that are giving products for Chinese New Year, right? For them, actually, January, February becomes like a peak months, right? So those kinds of intelligence and those kinds of actually, pattern or behavioral prediction, those are actually all machine learning based, right? I mean, you're constantly looking at this data, right? And see what is the best you can do. The other big challenge for the companies is SKUs, right? How many of the white should I be producing? How many of the black should I be producing, right? And it's also in the fact that consumers are becoming more and more fleeting demand, right? When you go into the store, you are fully made up your mind, I want to buy that product, right? And I want to have it today, right? So if you don't find it, you go like, I'm already in the store, I'm just going to find the next best to that. That's a fleeting demand, right? So at that time, it just becomes like a zero-sum game. One company won compared to the other.
Exactly. So with this note, we conclude that when this becomes a zero-sum game, we as a company, we as a team, we want to be more competitive, or we want to have that edge as compared to our competitors. So we must use these technologies to revolutionize our supply chains. And we thank you all.